I've been sitting over here on the side all day just trying to absorb all of the outstanding presentations, the wonderful question and answer period that had occurred here. But now, especially as I've been jumping from table to table to really look at the depth of the conversation that's going on and the great ideas that are bubbling up for ways in which the security sector, the military sector of the world, and the environmental sector could come together and could have a meaningful relationship. You know, Fritz asked me to mention something a bit about transformational change, and one of the I think the pretext of this meeting was that the military and the national security folks kind of thought one way, and you know, in a stereotypical fashion, you look at national security. In another stereotypical fashion, people look at environmentalists and conservationists and thinking a very different way. And one of the things that really impressed me today was the commonality and not the difference that is between the two. Yes, one may operate in a top-down command structure, and the other, the environmental community, is more of a grassroots stakeholder, dialogue-driven culture. But I think that pieces of the cultures that we each look at each other are more and more equally shared in a more common way. You know, as I look at transformational change, there are 5 key components in my mind, whether it's transformation of individuals, whether it's transformation of organizations, or whether it's transformation of nation states or multinational activities. And the first thing is the notion of sharing a vision. And really today, I mean, every speaker that spoke touched on a whole series of common visionary beliefs that we as human beings are moving to a significant crisis based on the impacts of climate change and a number of other environmental parameters. I was sitting at this table over here, and I had written down early on my notes here about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and Tommy started talking about it at the table, and it really made me smile, because no matter how we begin to look at the way human beings respond to these issues, it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy, and security in every sense of the form, whether it's the environment, whether it's personal security and safety, is really key before we can start to deal with many of the other issues. And so the intersection between the environmental parameters of food, of water, of biodiversity, and all of those things that were talked about are right at that base level. The second thing in transformational change is really looking at leadership. And one of the things that I've been most impressed with here today is just the abundance of leadership, both in this room and the networks that each and every one of us have, that we can bring together. And leadership that's not leadership in the number of stars I have on my shoulder, but leadership in the sense of innovation and the willingness to bring new ideas together. The third thing is alignment, and it's alignment of purpose and of work. And I think that there's some pieces of that are starting to emerge here today. You know, in thinking through all of the things that were talked about and then thinking, well, what does the security sector bring to the table for us as environmentalists? And then I was thinking, well, what does the environmental sector, what does the IUCN bring to the table that can feed into the needs of the security sector? And the notion of sharing tools and sharing science and sharing data clearly are things that we on the environmental side within IUCN have just a wealth of. And on the security side, the notion of looking at scenarios and the notion of looking at forecasting and the rigor of it. I was just saying at this table over here that we in IUCN have dabbled in scenarios, but we really, you know, they're kind of high-level anecdotal stories. The kind of scenario work that folks in CNA and others do are extremely data-driven. They're reflections of what the real world will be. But oftentimes they don't have enough of the real data to make the best forecast and to make the best analysis possible. So what do I see? I see an opportunity. The fourth thing in transformational change that's key is the notion of culture. And clearly the cultures in the environmental community, as I said earlier, and the environmental security community are born out of quite different things, but they're born out of some common elements. I was sitting at one table where people right here, they were talking about, you know, the history of engagement that goes back thousands and thousands of years, and the engagement, one of the elements of the engagement document, and was all about not shooting animals 5,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, and protecting the forest. Now you can shoot each other, but there's certain rules of engagement that the security sector has historically embedded in the kind of culture that they've had. The final one is a continual process, and that's really key in transformation. You know, all of a sudden you don't wake up one morning, take this course, and you're transformed, and you go out and you look at the world differently. It's a continual process and a continual set of dialogue and a continual set of next steps that build on each other. So those are the pieces of transformation, I think, that are going to be most important as these two cultures, these two communities come together. Now, I want to capture, and I'm going to come around, and there's a repertoire that was at each of these tables, and just to have you have just a short, you know, 2-minute kind of report out about what was the most salient points that were discussed at your table, and what were some of the salient recommendations that your group came up with.